Welcome in, folks, to another great episode of I've Got a Theory. I'm your host, Henish. I'm here with my guest, Jose Linares. Jose, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Henish. I appreciate the invite to join the podcast.
Yeah, so today we're going to discuss a growth versus fixed mindset and how that can be really different, can really lead to different results in your lifetime. Is that about right?
Yep, absolutely.
And so, basically the thinking is that if we can get people to think with a growth mindset, they would overcome some of their limiting beliefs and some of the challenges they might have in their life.
Yeah, that's basically what my thought process is, just coming through, the education system that we're all brought up in. And my experiences, I was just going back to the beginning. I would say I'm more on the shy side naturally. So I was kind of labeled more of like the introvert through like junior high school. And then I went away to college, and it kind of goes back to you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, that Jim Rohn always quotes.
Yep.
And in college, that first semester, I was surrounded by my roommates and my dorm mates that were I would label them as extra, always just, taking the initiative, going to the parties, everything. And I just tagged along with them because I didn't really, I went out of state, didn't really have that many connections. And when I returned that fall on that first winter break, my family just noticed a massive change in my personality and how I would express myself. And one of my uncles actually called up my grandfather and was like, "What happened to Jose?" And he's like, "What do you mean what happened to Jose?" It's like, I was just talking to him for 15 minutes before. It was like a 2-minute conversation, and he was almost like a mute before.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what, going back to the growth and fixed mindset, is that.
Let's go back there. Could you state your whole hypothesis effectively?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So my thought process is that the way that we were brought up in the education system is that it was more of a fixed mindset, in that we were everything that we knew was based on the grades that we received. So if we did poorly in math, we kind of just felt that my impression of myself was that I'm terrible at math. That was the one area that I was struggling. But versus a growth mindset, where it was maybe just my understanding and how I was learning math at the time that was limiting my potential and growth with that. So I think it's more so that trying to think of the best way to elaborate on that.
Well, yeah, I think I get what you're saying, because you get kind of pigeonholed based on your early experiences with a fixed mindset or a fixed education system that says, okay, we've tested you for reading, science, and math, and you're good at reading, but you're not good at science and math. And so therefore, we're not going to focus on science and math, as opposed to let's focus on that because you can get better with a little bit of practice in this stuff.
Correct.
Yeah. And so I think also, what you're getting at is that a fixed mindset kind of limits you to kind of objective options, right? In terms of you're looking at a multiple choice question, as opposed to a growth mindset kind of thrives better in like open-ended, open format type questions, right? When you've got a problem, you need to solve it. And there could be creative or multiple ways to solve the problem, which kind of gives you that growth opportunity to be more unique and, and show some ingenuity to solve a problem versus, 1 + 2 is 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so, tell me a little bit more about how being stuck in a fixed mindset or being brought up in a fixed mindset or with a fixed mindset education system changes people versus being in a growth mindset. And how can you get people to a growth mindset if that's the preferred outcome?
So I would honestly say that the growth mindset, how to make that flourish, is trying to work, trying to understand what drives that person. So for me, I found that I would flourish in situations that I was challenged, which is more of a growth mindset. The challenges are what will help me rise up to the occasion. So versus a fixed mindset where the challenges tend to be just, this is difficult, I can't do it because it's just too challenging.
Yeah, that's interesting. I knew people in my life like that. They'd be like, "Oh, I can't do it. It's impossible." And I was like, "Well, give me about 5 minutes. I'll take care of it." And so, and it was just kind of like, "Oh, I didn't think I could solve it that way." I was like, "Did you really even try?" It's like sometimes I have that at my house because I live close to the beach in PB. People are like, "Oh, I couldn't find any parking anywhere, so I just parked in your driveway." I'm like, "Well, I was hoping to play out there with the kids and your kids to play some basketball or something." And I was like, well, there's parking, just one street down, you can go another 100 feet and you'll be able to find a parking spot. But it was just kind of like, they didn't want to try hard enough to do it. Right.
Sure.
And I wonder if that has some kind of relationship with being a fixed versus growth mindset. Because in a growth mindset, you're saying, hey, I feel like I have a growth mindset because my thinking is if anyone else can accomplish it, then so can I. Right.
Absolutely.
With the fixed mindset, it says, oh, I didn't have the same experiences and opportunities and luck. And if I don't have that, then it's impossible for me to achieve XYZ or to do XYZ. And you yourself are going through this yourself, right? You're kind of in a regular job, but you're quickly finding out how to become an entrepreneur and an investor and a property owner as well.
Absolutely. And that was, and just like you said, for me, it was being around the right people that kind of changed my mindset about becoming that investor or becoming an entrepreneur. In that I was, listening to all of these much farther along in their investment journey. And, it just sparked an interest to me. And I never thought about owning multifamily properties prior to, say, 2016 when I started getting around the right people. And it was the fact that I knew where I wanted to go as far as financially, with family, with all of my goals. But it took being around the right people and understanding that I need to, invest in myself, invest in my personal development, invest in reading and just growth so that I can get to that level that everyone else is at.
So, I mean, for the most part, most of us don't grow up with business people, entrepreneur, successful, passive investor, owner parents, right? Most of us don't. Most of us grow up, probably 80, 90% of us grow up with parents that just have regular jobs, working 9 to 5 or something like that, earning a regular pay and trying to pay the bills every week, right? And so when you're in that mindset and you grow up in that mindset, and I know that's the case with my family, they're like, get a degree, do engineering or science or doctor or something like that, the standard kind of like, foreign immigrant from India path, and you'll earn a good living and you'll have a happy life. And that's that's the formula, right? Versus an investor mindset, which is completely different. Tell me a little bit about the difference there.
So I would say, just like you said, because I grew up the same way. I was the first to go to college, so that was number one. They're like, they're just Jose, you need to go to college, and you be a lawyer, become a doctor, something that had that success profession label around it. And but in order for me to find my path, it really just came down to the being around the right people. So like I said, it was being around those investors. Because prior to that, I was in career mode, and it was just about getting to the next level of, next promotion, getting the next performance raise. But I needed to find a way that would I can actually take full control of my future, my finances for my family and for, generational wealth. And that's where I needed to just came down to reading. So for me, it was all about reading what I didn't know. The growth mindset, basically, you can learn anything that you want to learn, but you just need to have the right tools in front of you. And for me, it was podcasts and books. If I can learn from other people's mistakes and others that are much farther along in their journey, then that will shorten the curve for me. But I'm also just able to accelerate that type of growth and that path for myself.
So, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki is probably one of the first books that many people in our paths come across because they're like, here's how you can get out of the rat race. And the rat race is you go to work, you earn a pay, and you pay your bills, and hopefully you put some money in savings so when you retire, you can live somewhat comfortably. But you got to grind it out for 30, 40 years before you can get there, right? That's the rat race.
Right.
But getting out of the rat race and into the investor mindset says, hey, if you can buy a property or buy a business or have activities that generate passive income, you might be able to put in a lot of work up front, but then put in a little bit of work the remaining time, and your return on investment for the amount of time you put in should be significantly more than what you would do if you're working at your job.
No, absolutely. That, and just like you said, that anyone who, I feel like anyone who has ever done real estate or has interest in investing has read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it is a mindset change, versus I can't afford that, to how can I afford that, or putting assets over liabilities. And that's the reason why I was not so interested in renting or in owning a home for myself, was because I was trying to find ways to generate income and put that money towards income generating assets, so that that would pay for my largest liability, which was the home. But now with the family, it changes a little bit, because you gotta have room for the little ones and everything. But I feel a lot more comfortable purchasing a home now that I have two properties generating income and cash flow for me to pay off that mortgage.
So tell me a little bit about that. Share with the listeners a little bit about what you've done, what you do for a living, and then what you've done to kind of create some passive income with your growth mindset now.
So full time, I work for a national restoration company, and basically our core business is commercial insurance adjusters and multifamily. And that's how I learned about the multifamily space, was speaking with all the institutional investors, and even the mom and pop investors that have scaled and grown to 100-unit portfolio, 1,000-unit portfolio. And I realized from my conversations with them that the first of the month, they could be anywhere in the world and they were still generating income. They were generating income in their sleep, whereas I'm trading my time for money, and they are putting their money to work to generate more money for them. So that was the biggest shift for me, and that was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, reading Cash Flow Quadrant. Those two books really changed the employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor mindset. Which quadrant made the most sense for me. And for me, it was the investor quadrant, where the goal is to purchase income generating assets that will cover all of my liabilities. So, for example, the first property that I purchased was this year. It was a 7-unit property, purchased that in March. And how I looked at that property was that I have right now he's 10 months old. I have a 10-month-old son. And how I looked at that property was that property will be either his college education, that will be his, initial funds for his first business, or that can be the funds for his first investment property. So I basically attribute that property to being his. I'll enjoy the cash flow for that, 15, 18 years. And then once he's ready to make whatever decision he wants, then we will do a cash out refinance, pull that money out tax free, and he can put that money towards whatever he's looking to do with his career and future.
That's a big why, right? I mean, that's kind of your big why, is like, hey, now not only am I going to use this investment to help fund for my child's future, but it's also setting the precedent that, hey, I'm going to teach you about this so you can do this when you're young and early, so you can figure out how to get into this growth mindset from the beginning. What else could you share with our listeners and our audience here, to talk about what it takes to shift from a mindset of fixed to growth, and to go from that's impossible to, all right, give me a week or give me a day and I'm going to solve that problem?
So I'll recommend a book that I just finished, which is Limitless by Jim Quick. I finished it a couple of weeks ago, and if you can see it right here. So I was following Jim Quick for a while, and actually one of the things that I tend to say to myself, and it's a limiting belief, and when I go to networking functions, conferences, whatever it is that I'm bad at remembering names. So even that small thing, that's the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. You're telling yourself that you are bad at names, that you can't remember names, but you really didn't have the motivation to remember that person's name. If it was someone who you were seeking out, or a name or a company that you knew in the back of your head was already in your reticular activating system, and then it just jumped out at you, then that is something that it will allow you to remember it. But if you're just trying to meet everyone in the room, then you're not going to you're not going to remember that. So it's really about the motivation and why you want to learn something. And that's why I liked his book, because it kind of breaks down how to learn, almost how to take those baby steps, you know, kind of work through those limiting beliefs and help you read a little bit better. And that's kind of what it's all about, is the self.
That's interesting. So you're saying, I haven't heard of this book yet, so I'm going to put it on my list. So you're basically telling me that this book has taught you to learn and learn better, even as an adult that's past like school age. You're still figuring out how to learn better and faster potentially.
Yeah, I always, my goal is to always get 1% better every single day. So whether that be something new that I can read, even like 10 minutes a day of reading, or a podcast listen to while I'm walking the dog, doing dishes, doing, cleaning, something that will, help me move forward with whatever goal that I have at that moment in time. So that's kind of why I've embraced the growth mindset over the years, is that I know that I can get better. I'm much better today than I was yesterday, just for, that 20 minutes of a podcast I listen to while walking the dog.
Yeah, gives you a new idea, gives you a new mindset, gives you a fresh perspective, and it helps you overcome those limiting beliefs or negative beliefs that some people have, and it just consumes you like a toxin, right? It consumes you like a cancer, and it just gets worse and worse. Otherwise, you could do the same thing with the opposite end, which is with a growth mindset or with an appreciation mindset. You can learn to get better and better and grow more and more every day, right? You can kind of choose that, right? And so you see people falling into two edges of the spectrum. Obviously, there's people on the inside too that just kind of are stay with, okay, I'm going to make it through another day at a time, versus people with the growth mindset say, hey, I'm planning for my kid in 18 years from now, versus I don't know how I'm going to make my mortgage payment next month. Yep. Right. And so you get a lot of that. So it's important to be able to keep educating yourself and keep pushing yourself and keep challenging yourself. Right. And then limit those words. And I totally get what you're saying with the name thing. That was one of my very few New Year's resolutions I made probably about 20 years ago, is being a guy named Henish. There's very few people that have my same name. Right. It's not like getting lost in the crowd of Mikes and Joes. People would remember my name, and I hated that on college campus. People would like, "Oh, hey, Henish, I met you the other day." I'm like, "God, I can't remember that person's name." Right. And I quickly changed that. I made that a New Year's resolution. I said, "I'm going to work hard to remember people's names." So I would think about it when they were telling me. I'd make sure I used it in that conversation when I'm talking to them. I'd think about that person later in the day, and then maybe even the next day, like, who are the people that I met yesterday? So when I see them again, hopefully I'll get a better chance of remembering. So now I'm pretty good at it. Like now I can go into a room, meet 10 or 15 people, and probably remember all of them.
Yeah. But you were intentional about that. And that's what it really comes down to, is kind of being intentional about the learning and your growth, versus just saying, oh, I'm just terrible at names. Because I hear that all the time.
I hate that too, because I feel like it's almost disrespectful, right? I was like, like I'll make a joke. I was like, are you saying that I'm not memorable?
Right.
That's what you're saying. It's like you care so little about who I am and what I can do, that you don't even want to think about the most important word to me, which is my own name.
Yes.
Right. And so if you can get over your own self-absorbed, oh, my puny mind can't handle another word with 4 to 10 letters in it. That's shame on you. It's not shame on the person. Like, oh, well, sorry, my name's just Joe Bob, like it's my name, and that's what they call me. And please remember it. And then, maybe associate something with it. Right. That's simple tips. Like, okay, I met him at this event, or he was wearing a red shirt, or he, had a funny beard, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. You got to make that. And I've done those memory classes a couple of times. If you ever done like a speed memory class, like within an hour, a good speed memory coach can teach you how to remember like 25 to 30 things. Mm-hmm. Right. Have you ever done one of those classes?
I actually did. Just signed up for one of Jim's classes for that as well. But yeah, it's all about the techniques. And that's why I was really interested in his book, because it was basically learning how to learn again. And that's where I wanted to, I still had this limiting belief that I was a slow reader. And so that's why I embraced more Audible versus actually like sitting down and reading. But it was just the fact that I associated that with when you're younger and they call on you to read in front of the class and maybe you mispronounce a word. I still remember one particular time where I mispronounced a word and the class had laughed, and that stuck with me so long.
Oh, that
That was
hurts.
one of those that fixed mindset. It's just I'm a slow reader, or I was having issues with reading, but it was just the fact that I didn't truly embrace reading as much, and that's what helped me grow. Is that I embraced reading and I enjoy reading now. Prior to that, I probably only finished 4 books. I would read them all the way till maybe the second or third last chapter, but I wouldn't finish the books for whatever reason, mostly because they were assigned. But now, like I just embrace that because I know it'll make me that much better.
Yeah, I've taken speed reading classes in the past too, and I'd get faster, but I couldn't get to the 2 to 3,000 words per
Oh,
minute.
sure.
Some people can do, but like I've clocked myself around 600 to 700, which is like faster than normal, but like still not fast enough where I'm like cooking through pages. Um, but but I do find even on Audible and audiobooks, I'll speed up the replay speed to 1.25 to 1.5x just so I can get through that book a little bit faster. Because
Yep.
some narrators speak a little slower, and I'm like, let's go. I can take the content 25% faster, right?
Right.
So yeah, interesting. Well, cool. Well, Jose, well, thanks for spending some time on this podcast with me and sharing your theory about having a growth mindset, which is something that probably everyone could benefit from. To be candid, we don't need all chiefs and no Indians, as that saying goes. So we do still need people to work and be in farms and be in factories and warehouses and do stuff. But that doesn't mean that with your off hours that you can't do stuff that's productive for yourself, for your financial future, for your family. Because if you're working 40 hours a week, you still have a lot of hours left. Take advantage of those, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
That's kind of the thinking. That's what you're doing. You're working. You've got a full-time job, but in your off hours, you're figuring out how to make your money work for you.
Yep. Yeah, I do it. The 2 hours before work, and then another probably 3 hours after work, and then any other time I can fit it in between.
That's great. And so that's what it takes to get out of the rat race, right? Is effectively what we're trying to do is, how do we get from I have to wake up and work every day to cool, there's more money in my bank than there was yesterday, and I didn't do a whole lot overnight.
Exactly.
That's huge. Well, folks, thanks for joining me. Jose, thank you for joining me. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe. And you can add us on Instagram at PSTV Network. You can find us there. Otherwise, thanks for joining me on another great episode of I've Got a Theory.
Thanks, Henish.